To start off this lesson, I want to look at a quote by Bill Gates, and he says, "I choose a lazy person to do a hard job because a lazy person will find an easy way to do it." And I think there's some truth to the saying that lazy programmers are good programmers, because lazy programmers aren't going to want to write 1,000 lines of code. That's going to take a lot of work. They're going to want to try to fix a problem by writing like 10 lines of code. And if we have less code in our application, it's going to be easier on the programmers because they don't need to write so much. And it's also going to be easier to read through the application and know what it's doing. So I think there's some truth to this statement. In my case, what I'm doing is I'm developing a leads application. So what I want to do is just go over to the routes file and just talk a little bit about what it is that I want to create here. And I also want to be lazy about it. I want to have to write the least amount of code possible to do this. I wanted to talk a little bit about the leads application that I wanted to create. And this leads application is also going to have different implementations of it. So one of the implementations of this leads application is going to be freightforum.com, which is a site about logistics. And basically some people in the freight forwarding industry or in the shipping industry, they can find some leads related to the logistics industry. So there's different parts to the logistics industry. There's different ways we ship things. So like one is FCL, which means a full container load. There's also LCL, which means less than container load. There's bulk. There is there's trucking. So these are different subsections of the logistics industry. Another idea I have for a leads application also relates to recycling. So the recycling industry could also have leads. There's different subsections of recycling. There's plastics. People can recycle plastics. They can recycle cardboard. They can recycle perhaps old computers. So there's different things that you can recycle. So each of these different areas has their own subsections, and each one of these is an implementation of the leads application. So what I'm writing here is not necessarily just one implementation, it's all of the implementations. And I don't want to have to write code for all of the different implementations of this application. So the code that I'm writing now, I want it to be for all the different implementations, which is logistics and recycling and any other kind of leads implementation. And I also want it to cover all of the different subsections. I don't want to have to write a lot of different codes for all of these different subsections, plastic, cardboard, and old computers, etc. So the challenge here is I need to write code one time that's going to handle all of these cases. So basically what our application is going to need to be, it's going to need to be very dynamic. So I've written some code so far for this application, and I'm pretty happy with how it's going so far. And I'll just show you where I'm at right now. So let's just comment this out and go over to the first section, which is FCL. So we're in the logistics implementation right now. The URL right now is freightforum.new, and we're in the FCL section. And you can see we're showing all of the FCL leads right now. So right now I'm working with a sample database, which is from the old site, and that gives us some data that we can work with. And in the URI here we have /FCL. If I click on the left here, less than container load, we get those leads. If I click air freight, we get these, break bulk, and international moving. You'll notice the headers change each time and the data. So this is all dynamic, and it's depending on LCL right here. So one thing you might be wondering now is how much code did I need to write for all these? Did I need to write different views for all of these different sections? Did I need to give them all different controllers because they have different different segments right here? And the answer is no. I only needed to write one piece of code to do all of this. And the code that I wrote is not just for this Freightforum implementation. It's going to be for all of the different implementations. So for example, if this wasn't Freightforum, it could also be Recycling Forum, and this code is also going to work. So let's go over to the code and see what I did. So I have a leads controller right here. Let's first go over just to the routes file for a second. And you see we have all of these logged in routes right here. FCL, LCL, bulk. And they all point to the lead controller. I might look into a way to sort of get less code here as well, because there's kind of a lot of duplication, but just for right now I'll leave the resource routes right here just how they are. All of these different sections are pointing to lead controller. So let's go over to the lead controller and see what's going on here. The first thing I'm doing here is I'm including my leads class. I guess you can say this is my repository. I have something of a repository pattern implemented here, and basically all this is it's a class that's going to include a lot of domain logic. I'll just show you briefly where that is, and I think we'll talk in another lesson about how I included this, and also a bit about PSR4 and including that with Composer. But basically I created a new folder here inside my app folder, I believe it is. So here in the app folder we have a leads folder, inside that is repository, and inside that we have a leads.php, and there's just some different domain logic right here. So inside the leads controller, the first thing I'm doing is creating a protected data array right here. And inside the constructor I'm doing just a little bit of things that I think I'm going to need for potentially all the different methods in this controller. The first part here is really important. What I'm doing is I'm using this request : segment 1. And what this is doing is it's grabbing this part of the URL. And this portion right here is extremely important. This part is going to determine everything that happens after, and this is the way I keep my application dynamic. So from this part I can know the subsection of the leads implementation that I'm working with, and from the part before the .com or the .new or .dev or whatever you want to call it, this lets me know the implementation. So because it's freight form here, I know I'm working with logistics. If this was like recycling form, then I know I was dealing with the recycling implementation. So everything is dynamic and it's dependent on the URL. So what I do is I grab that part, and this section is now set to FCL. And after that, I get the lead categories. The lead categories are needed for the left side here in the sidebar, and those are all shown there. So for these lead categories, we're only going to want to show the categories for this logistics implementation. So let's hop over and take a look at that method. If we go to leads and get lead categories, I have a switch statement right here, and the switch is checking the app identifier. So the app identifier lets it know the implementation, and if the implementation is freight form, then it's going to return these categories. This app identifier I've set it as a constant inside a new file that I created called constants.php. So by default in Laravel you're going to have an app folder, and a lot of people will put a helpers.php file inside here, and I will as well. I haven't got to that yet. But I also like to create a constants.php, and if we look inside that, we'll just see one constant being defined. The app identifier is set to basically the part in the HTTP host. So all I've done here is I've exploded the HTTP host, and then I've grabbed the first part of it right here. So right now in development I have freightform.new. Okay, this could also be freightform.dev or local or whatever you want. And then in production it's going to be freightform.com. So no matter what this is at the end here, what I'm just doing is grabbing this first part right here, which is freightform. And I'm grabbing that and I'm storing it inside the app identifier. And what I'm thinking right now is I can also force this to be lowercase, and that's probably a bit better as well. So let's go back over to that method right here, and inside the app identifier, if it's freight form, then we're returning these, and if it was another domain such as recycle form, then we're going to return the recycle categories there. So we've got the section now, we've got the lead categories, and now we're going into our index method. Now, knowing what model to grab from was another challenge. And if I open up my models folder here, you'll see I have a few different models created. We have the air freight model, we have bulk, FCL, international moving. These represent a whole bunch of different tables in my database. So the FCL leads, they will all be in the FCL table right here. The LCL will be inside this table. So what I need to do is I need to select from these different tables dynamically, and we can do that in PHP. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting the model name here from get model name, and let's just go over here and we'll search for get model name. And what that's being done is it's being passed the slug, essentially the section, and then what it's doing is it's returning the model name. So if it's lowercase FCL right here, which is capital F and then CL, okay, whatever model name you want to give it. If I open up the FCL model here, you'll see that this matches with all these different things that are being returned here. So we grabbed the model name based on the section that was grabbed from the URL. And the next thing that I want to know is I want to know what fields do I need to select. Now what I could do here is just select everything. I could just, we could just remove this part right here. Instead of select fields, we could just do this and that would select the whole table. So it just would be like select star and SQL. But I don't want to take some fields that I don't need. So just to keep this optimized, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in an array of the fields that I need. So in this second line, fields is set to leads.getRequiredFields, fields, and we pass it the section. So let's just take a look at that really quickly. That's at the top. So it gets past the section. If it's FCL, then it just returns the fields that we need. We won't necessarily show all these fields, but we'll need them all. I'll need the ID and I'll need the user ID. So we grab all those fields that we need, and then we use from Laravel's query builder, select, and then we pass in an array of the fields. This is actually not in the documentation. I had to test this. So you can put in comma separated values here, okay, or you can just pass in an array of the fields and that works fine as well. So I pass in an array of the columns that I need. Here I'm taking 25 just as an example, and then we're using get, and what this is going to do is it's going to return a collection of all the leads that we need. In the next line, I also am creating a fields variable, but this is just getting the showable fields, so the ones that I want to show in the table. So it's a little bit different here. In this first one, I'm selecting all the fields I need. This next one, I just want to get the ones that I'm show. So in the previous one, I also want the ID. I'm going to need this when I'm using modals and for some other reasons. And I'm also going to need the user ID so I know where the message is sent to, and I'm going to use those in the future. So these are the ones that I need to select. But I also need to get the fields that I just need to show. So if we go back over to the site for a second, the ones that I'm showing are at the top here, all these headers: container, quantity, gross weight. Obviously I don't want to show the ID here because that's not interesting to the user. Let's just look at this method quickly, get showable fields, which is right here, and we're passing that the selection. And what I wanted to do here was return an associative array because I wanted to use the index in one case and I wanted to use this human readable value in the table heading. So whenever you need sort of like a pair of data, you can just return an associative array, and that was useful in this case. Going to the next line, as you know, the section is all lowercase right now, and I just created this helper method which is called pretty title, and that takes the section and basically it formats it to the way that I want to display it on the page. So if we go quickly to pretty title here, you'll just see if it's lowercase FCL, then I want to return it in all capitals here. But in another case, if it's air-freight, I want to return it like this. So just a simple helper function right there. Finally, I'm passing in the title. This title is used in the master file. So if I go to views, layouts, and then master.play.php, you'll see that is being output right here. So whatever variables you pass through to your view, those will also be available within the master file. That didn't used to be the case in Laravel. but now anything you pass through, those are also very available within your master view. Finally, what we're doing is just returning the view and also the data that we want to pass through to it. Now, most Laravel programmers, they won't use this. They will just use data, but I like to use this because what this allows me to do is also set some variables inside the constructor. And a lot of times my controllers will also, like within the constructor, I will also instantiate I'll also get some data from the parent constructor if this lead controller is extending another class. So I just find it a bit more flexible to use this because then I can grab data from the constructor or even the parent constructor, and those will all be properties of this controller object. So this is just a personal preference if you want to use this. So just remember what I have here now in this controller. This lead controller is the controller for all of the different implementations of this application and also for all of these different pages. And each of these different pages is also using only one view. So we can take a look at that view now. The view is here. It's in leads index.blade.php. And basically all of the code is right here. I've used the include statement, this basically including some header code here and some footer code and some things like that. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of this view right here. And in the content section here, we have the section that we pass through, and this is leads for, and then for the date. Whenever you want to work with dates in Laravel, you can use this carbon class, which comes with Laravel. And normally you would need to, if you wanted to use carbon within your views, you would have to do something like this. You would have to reference the namespace it's in. But what I've done just to keep things a bit cleaner in the view is inside the config folder we have an app.php, and what you can do in the aliases portion here is you can just add carbon here. So the full namespace is carbon/carbon, but I'm creating an alias for it, so when I just call carbon, it is going to reference the full namespace, and that just keep things a little bit cleaner within the view. And you can find out all the different things that you can do with Carbon from Carbon's GitHub page. So this is the table we need to build for all of the different sections, and we need to keep everything dynamic here. So because of the work we did in the controller here, inside the table header here, what we're doing is for each fields as header, we are outputting the header. Remember that fields was an associative array. It had the indexes and the human readable value here. And for the human readable value, that is going to be the header. So we'll see here, we have container, quantity, gross weight. Let's just go back to that really quickly here. You'll see that's the get showable fields here. So here we have basically the column from the database, and then we have the human readable value on the right. So for each fields as header, then output the header. And let's go down to the table body here, and we have for each leads as lead. So remember we grabbed a collection of leads from the database. So we can use our fields array here, and we can just output the keys here. So just lead arrow key, and that's going to show all of the fields that we specified inside get showable fields. So no matter how many sections I add to this, no matter how many categories we add to the freight application, or if we create a new implementation for recycling or maybe real estate or any other kind of thing that uses leads, we've done everything within one view right here, and within one controller, and also a class that basically all it's doing is it's taking the section from our URL, this part right here, and in some cases it's using the app identifier right here. It's grabbing this part in order to know what to do, and then just returning some information within this class to let the controller know what to do, and then the controller handles the rest. we'll never need to create new controllers or new views because we're doing things in a very dynamic way based on what's in the URL. So just to conclude, going back to the routes file here, anything that there could be a lead involved in, maybe real estate in the future, we want to create a new application about that. And real estate has houses, it has apartments, it has mobile homes. So whatever you can think of, basically we've already written all the code for it. So that is my lesson on being a lazy programmer.